Alright, so welcome back to the channel, and recently someone asked me to make a video kind of explaining what Fashion Week is. So in this video I'm going to give my best attempt to explain what Fashion Week is, why it's held, and what exactly do brands achieve by showing at Fashion Week. So the official definition of Fashion Week is an industry event lasting approximately 1 week where fashion designers, brands or houses display their latest collections in runway fashion shows to buyers and the media. These events influence trends for the current and upcoming seasons. So yeah, that's basically what Fashion Week is. I read somewhere that there are more than 138 Fashion Weeks worldwide, but I'm sure the ones that everyone knows and the ones you hear about are the main 4 on the calendar, and that's New York Fashion Week, London Fashion Week, Paris Fashion Week, and Milan Fashion Week. Those 4 cities are the fashion capitals. Now aesthetically, they're all kind of different. So Paris is where all the big brands go, and most of the time when a brand has made it in the mainstream, they move to Paris. It's where the biggest brands like Dior, Louis Vuitton, Balenciaga all show their shows. Milan is more kind of interchangeable with Paris. A lot of brands want to get big, they either go to Paris or Milan. Paris is just a bit bigger. Milan is also different in the fact that it's known for having more outlandish collections, like Italian fashion and Italian style is very maximalist. So a lot of Italian brands like Dolce & Gabbana, Versace, Prada, those type of brands are all kind of very maximalist, apart from Prada of course, but Gucci is also an Italian brand. So yeah, I would say Milan Fashion Week and Paris Fashion Week are like the 2 big ones. London is more like emerging talent. London is known as having the most experimental designs and the least commercial designs. So when you go to London, you can literally expect anything. That's why I love London. From an artistic standpoint, London is almost always at the forefront. Paris and Milan are more at the forefront of craftsmanship, but because the houses are so big, they can only be so experimental unless we're talking about brands like Comme des Garçons and the likes. And then of course we have New York Fashion Week, where the aesthetic is very eclectic. A lot of brands are deeply rooted in a lot of different cultures. So yeah, that's basically New York. So going further into kind of like how Fashion Week works, Fashion Week is normally like a 4-week circuit. So most times, this doesn't happen every time, but it happens most of the time, Fashion Week starts in New York. So New York Fashion Week happens first, and then it's London Fashion Week, and then it's Milan Fashion Week, and Paris, because it's the most important, is always last. Sometimes London and New York might change, but Milan is always second to last and Paris is always last. Now, like I said, there are so many other Fashion Weeks. There's Fashion Week in Japan, Tokyo Fashion Week. There is Copenhagen Fashion Week is also like not one of the big 4, but it's still a well-known Fashion Week that a lot of people go to. Lagos Fashion Week in Nigeria is starting to become really big. And there's also Miami Fashion Week. Miami Fashion Week is really important because it's the biggest Fashion Week event for like swimwear and beachwear. So Miami Fashion Week is definitely relevant and something I wanted to just mention in the video briefly. Now, when people are learning about Fashion Week and like want to understand Fashion Week, the question I'm always asked is like, who goes to fashion shows? How do you get into a fashion show? So basically, Fashion Week is kind of business. So the type of people that go, first of all, you have the editors, journalists from like GQ, journalists from, I don't know, W Magazine, ID, whatever. All of them get invited because brands need press. Press will give your brand publicity, and it will introduce your brand and your collections to a wider audience. So you definitely want as much press as you could fit in your fashion show. The most important people though, I think, at Fashion Week are buyers, because buyers are people that actually directly give you money. The press will kind of, you know, write about your show and give you publicity that might lead into sales, but in terms of direct money, buyers bring the direct money. Now, I know a lot of people that watch this channel, you guys are fashion literate, but there are a lot of people who watch my channel who want to learn about fashion. So if you don't know what a buyer is, Say a big store like Selfridges. A buyer is someone that buys the clothes that you see stocked in Selfridges. So a buyer is the person that selects and dictates what a store stocks, essentially. And that's why people say, oh, the buy this season was bad in that store. The buy, because they don't like what the buyers decided to buy from a collection. Now, buyers, it's kind of a difficult job, and there are actually degrees you can study for buying. It's more complicated than it sounds, because as a buyer, you have to really know your market, and you have to look deeply, and your market can be based on the area your store is located in, the aesthetic of the other brands that are stocked in different sections that are stocked in your store, the reason why people come to your store, what the demographic of the people that come to your store is, and you have to factor all of that into when you buy clothes. But going back to Fashion Week, so what a buyer will do, a buyer will see a show on a runway, decide what looks they like, then go into a showroom where they can see these clothes and like feel them up close, and then based on that they'll decide, okay, our brand's gonna stock this, we need 100 units, we're gonna give you so and so amount of money for 100 units. So first of all, buyers, the most important. I've said the journalists and press. So I have been invited to some fashion shows as press, even though I'm not really big. Like, my YouTube channel is not really that big, but just giving you an idea of like why people get invited to fashion shows. There are also other people like celebrities. That's more to do with kind of like press again, publicity. If people see their favorite celebrity associating themselves with a certain brand, then obviously their fans might buy it. So that's also kind of like press. You also just generally have a lot of like the designers' friends and family and stuff like that that also attend the show. So once again, because I get this asked this question so much, if you want to be invited to a fashion show, or you want to get into a fashion show without sneaking in, which is actually quite possible, you need to bring something to the table. You have to have a reason as to why a brand will invite you to their show. They're not just going to invite you for no reason, because most fashion shows have limited spaces. So you either have to cover their show, talk about their show, you have to be some form of press that they deem is important or can bring value to the brand, or be a buyer, of course, because obviously if you're a buyer, you're giving them direct money when you buy the collections, or stylists as well. Big celebrity stylists are always invited to shows, because a lot of brands blow up just by being on a celebrity. So say I invite said stylist to my show, this 2 years down the line, because I have a good relationship with this stylist, the stylist uses one of my garments and puts it on, let's say, Drake. Now my brand is going to go from unknown to blowing up overnight, just because I had a good relationship with the stylist. So when the stylist was styling, had a job to do with Drake, my brand was in thought for the stylist. So yeah. So something that is very confusing, a lot of people are like, why is there so many fashion weeks? Fashion week is all over the place. First of all, like I said, there's so many fashion weeks, over 180 worldwide. So there's always going to be some form of fashion week. But let's be fair, the ones that most people really care about is Milan, London, New York, and Paris. Now, in terms of those shows, historically, they only really show 2 times a year, and I'm going to expand to this. So there are the spring summer collections and the autumn winter collections. Further on, so before there was only a women's wear fashion week, and if you're a menswear designer, you would kind of just squeeze into the women's wear schedule. Now, however, because there are so many menswear designers and there's a big rise in like menswear, there has now been like a separate menswear schedule created. So originally it was only women's wear, and it's usually held in Feb. So February is normally the fall winter, the autumn winter collections, and then September is when you have the spring summer collections. The reason why they're in those time frames is because it takes kind of like 9 months for a brand to fulfill an order. So a brand has to show their fall winter collection in February, so that when the fall winter season actually comes the next year, the clothes are then in stores. So same thing with spring summer, September. So by the time like 6 months to 9 months, it's actually summer when they're actually selling the garments. So yeah, then going deeper though, some brands, like bigger brands that can afford it, then have collections in between the spring, summer and the autumn, winter. So you see brands like Dior, Louis Vuitton, they have pre-fall collection. So that's a collection before the fall collection, the fall winter collection. So there are loads of transitional collections. There's like resort collections that is normally in between spring, summer and the fall winter. Or you can have a pre-fall, you can have a pre-spring. There are literally some brands that have just like 6, 7 collections a year. The reason for those collections, like a resort, a pre-collection, is actually if you're a big brand and you want to keep your customers engaged and you want to create an experience, you have kind of like transitional pieces. So in some countries, and this is where global brands are really important, because in some countries they don't follow like the westernized seasons. So they don't have winter in December, January, February, and I don't know, summer in, you know, June, July, August. So they have to cater for all the customers worldwide that don't follow the same season range, as well as kind of having transitional pieces for the Western customer. So there'll be pieces that aren't too hot, aren't too warm most of the time. So that's just to clarify, because I know a lot of people do get confused by like pre-fall, what's a resort collection and stuff like that. So going into menswear, menswear literally just finished now. So I'm sure most of you will know that menswear is held in January and it's held in June. So yeah, you normally have the main, like Paris, London, New York, Milan, menswear in January, and it might dip into February some years, and then you have the shows in June. So now you guys know the main shows: spring, summer, fall, winter season. Menswear January and June, women's wear February and September. Then of course in between we have pre-fall collections, we have resort collections, and of course when talking about Fashion Week, you can't talk about Fashion Week without mentioning Haute Couture. And Haute Couture, without getting too deep into it, is basically a way of making clothing that has to be in Paris, has to follow a certain number of rules, and it's made by the best artisans in Paris and made with the best quality materials and the best craftsmanship. And Haute Couture is normally handmade. So Haute Couture is always a big fixture in terms of fashion. So like I said, Haute Couture is only shown in Paris. It's a rule, it can only be shown in Paris, and it's shown in January and it's also shown in July. Now another thing that people always wonder is, why, if Fashion Week is all about runway shows, why are there people that put on presentations and stuff like that? Now from a brand perspective, if your brand isn't too big or you don't have the financial means, it's actually cheaper to put on a presentation than it is to have a runway show. If you don't know what a presentation is, normally at any Fashion Week is held at a certain place. So in London, menswear is held at the Truman Brewery in Shoreditch, Old Street-ish area, and women's wear is held at the Strand, sorry. Now, the Strand, Truman Brewery is like a big space, and then most of the fashion shows will take place within the Truman Brewery, or some bigger brands will go and have just a show in a literally purpose-built place made just for their show, that they've set up just for their show. So if you were to walk in, let's say the Strand or the Truman Brewery, there are different like rooms and spaces apart from the place that people use for runway shows, and those are the spaces where some designers might just pay to have a presentation, and it'll just be literally the models standing still wearing the clothes, and then throughout the day people can just come through and, I don't know, look at the clothes basically. Most designers that do presentations, it's because they can't afford to have a runway show. But sometimes it is just artistic expression, and some brands actually just genuinely opt to do a presentation instead of a runway show. So another big talking point and big part of fashion is street style. Now, because people go to Fashion Week in their craziest outfits, their best outfits, it's a good chance for photographers to get street images of like really interesting people wearing really interesting outfits, and because of this, it's kind of become a weird thing where not only do people that normally go to Fashion Week go to Fashion Week, now there's people who like don't go for any shows. They just go there to dress up, stand outside, and just get their pictures taken by all the photographers there who just want to take interesting photos, and hopefully they can get a high quality image that they can put on their Instagram, which is a bit strange. Like, I don't know, I just can't do that. Like, before recently, I've only been to Fashion Week consistently for the past 2 years. Before then, I just never went to Fashion Week. Like, I'm just one of those people, I just don't want to embarrass myself. Like, if I don't have a reason to go, I'm not gonna like show up at all. But yeah, those are not the only type of photographers there. You also have like Vogue photographers and GQ photographers who actually do street style for their website and stuff. So another thing is people want to get on Vogue, or people want to get on GQ, like say, oh, I've been on Vogue or whatever. I've been on Vogue there. So yeah, that's kind of like what is a big talking point in terms of Fashion Week. So that's something that brings a lot of hype, and it is a big talking point in terms of fashion, because a lot of people, when they think of Fashion Week, they don't really even think of the runway shows and stuff. They just think of street style, what this influencer wore and stuff like that. So hopefully now you know the role of Fashion Week is basically just a whole marketing and promotion event for fashion brands, for a way for them to gain exposure, let more people know about their clothing items, as well as sell. The ultimate goal is to lead to sales. So yeah, that's literally the role of Fashion Week. A lot of people do question the relevance of Fashion Week now, because before, Fashion Week was only seen by just fashion people, and you know, just the higher class, high quality. Okay, something else I've got to mention is, if you're a VIP customer of a brand, then you get invited to the fashion shows. So say you're like top 20 people that spend the most in Dior, then yeah, you all get invites. Like VIP customers always get invites to fashion shows, like runway shows. So let's say, I don't know, someone bought loads of Balenciaga in a year, like tens of thousands pounds worth. Or actually, that wouldn't be enough for Balenciaga. It'd probably be like, maybe like if you spent £100,000 on Balenciaga in a year, you'll probably get invited to the next show. But going back to what I was saying, a lot of people do question the relevance of Fashion Week now, because it isn't so elitist as it once was, and that is mainly due to social media. And a lot of people question that now, if I have an audience of 1 million on Instagram, do I really need to spend all that money on a fashion show? Because if people don't know, it's really expensive to show at Fashion Week unless you have funding or you're backed by the BFC or someone. It could cost something like 50,000 or more just to show, like at London Fashion Week, for example. I'm talking about London because that's what I know about. I know there are many knowledgeable guys that follow this channel, luckily. So if you have any information, be sure to comment down below and let other people know like how it is in Milan, in Paris, in New York and other places. But yeah, I feel like over time we'll see less and less brands take the traditional approach to Fashion Week and following the Fashion Week schedules, because now there's social media and people have really big followings. I think more people are just going to do shows in their own time when they have the clothes ready, as opposed to having to churn out collections by the spring, summer season, the fall, winter season, and everyone's stressed out and everyone's trying to hit deadlines. And yeah, but something that is still of relevance in terms of Fashion Week is how Fashion Week influences trends. So everyone knows, if you know anything about fashion, everyone knows that whatever brand show on the runway is always like three years ahead of the curve. So whatever trend you see on the runway, we'll see Zara, H&M and all those brands kind of copy all the higher end brands, maybe like 2-3 years after, which is also a bit strange. Normally, so how Fashion Week works, once again I'm talking about London, because London I've been to loads of times. Just like London Fashion Week, so you have shows like, let's say 10 AM to 10:30 AM Paris Farzane, 10:30 AM to 11 A Cold Wool. It just goes like that for 3 days. And then after like 6, 7, 8ish, when most of the shows end, there's always like an after party. And after parties are really cool. Like you get to meet different people in the industry. You get to network, which is really, really key in a creative industry like fashion. If you're antisocial, fashion is not the industry for you, because unless you're like the next Galliano, you're going to need to network to make it anywhere. So yeah, parties are really good for that. One thing people love about fashion parties as well, a lot of them, especially if they are invite only, have like free drinks and free food on the brand, just like, or on whoever's throwing it, like a magazine or whatever. And Fashion Week is also known for like the parties, because the parties are really good. And fashion people already are kind of, well, most of them anyway, are already very unconventional people in the view of the masses, for example. So you get some very interesting characters at fashion parties. The last thing I want to address, and this is because so many people ask me that question, is can you sneak into a fashion show? Now, I wouldn't advise it, because I'm not advising anyone to sneak in a show, because to be fair, in most fashion shows, most of the seats are accounted for. So if you sneak into a show and you sit somewhere, you might have taken someone important's seat. And I don't know, it's because like I see things in the lens of if I was a fashion designer. I really want the people I want at my show, because that's going to give my people at my show maximum exposure. So as a fashion designer, I wouldn't like if someone took the space of a space I intended for an editor of, let's say, a magazine to have. So if you sneak into a show, just be mindful of taking seats. Some shows are like standing, so they might not notice if there's just like other people standing behind the people that are sitting down. So that's fine. In terms of sneaking into shows though, I kind of went on a tangent there. It can be hard and it can be easy. It just depends on the PR team that is running the show. So most brands have PR teams, public relations, and those are mostly the people that run like security for the shows and stuff like that. So in England, in London at least, one of the PR agencies that is known to be impossible to get into their shows is Karla Otto. Karla Otto, they have brands like Martine Rose, A Cold Wool, Kiko Kostadinov. Those brands, just forget about sneaking into those brands. Like, forget it. Some other things like New Gen, their shows are a bit easier to sneak into, and some shows literally like you just walk in if no one's looking. You just walk in, act natural, and you'll watch the show. But yeah, that when people ask me that question, it's a bit of a tough one, because it's easy and hard. Like I said, it just comes down to who is actually running the security and if it's your day, if you're lucky. But yeah, I hope in a nutshell I've been able to explain quite a few things about Fashion Week, just because a lot of people do get confused about like when does it happen. It's a bit chaotic. What are the main fashion weeks? People want to know like more information about Fashion Week. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about it briefly. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did like the video, subscribe to my channel if you're new. This is the Fashion Archive, and I make videos about fashion, as the name suggests. I do have a Patreon. If you want to support the channel financially, the link to that will be in the description below. If you want to join a group chat where people talk about fashion, the link to that is also in the description below. And on that note, I'll be back with another video shortly.